Okay, hello everybody. My name is Lav Kumar. I'm a security researcher. I've been a penetration tester, and I'm also a developer of a security tool. I'm a little intimidated, I must say, because I'm like in the midst of all Python experts. I'm not a Python expert myself, but the tool I've written, it does have a Python scripting component, so some of you might be interested in that. A quick poll: how many of you here do web application related programming? Probably. Yeah, that's like alright, so that's like half of you. Right. The others, what kind of Python coding do you guys do?
It's my first class. So
What's your first class? Okay. How about the others? What kind? Okay. The others, do you guys write Python code? No. You do? You guys don't know. You guys don't. But you would like to start coding Python, right? Okay. So what I'll do is, in this session, I'll very quickly explain how you can, identify security issues on a web application in an automated way, right? And I'll also explain how you can write Python code for web application related tasks, right? So for example, if you want to fetch a page from the server, and if you want to analyze the page, see what kind of content is inside it, and then you want to submit a form in the page, basically regular web interaction. So anything like that, if you want to do it in Python, so how you can do it in an easy way, right? So that's what I'm going to do in this session. So what I'll do is I'll be using my tool a lot. So I think I'll sit down, if you guys don't mind, so that I can explain this. Now I'll start with a demo. This is the tool that I've written. It's called as IronWasp, right? You can download it from ironwasp.org. It's a free open source tool, right? It's written in .NET, right? So it's based on Windows, but then you don't have to worry because this thing runs on Linux as well. There is a script available which downloads the required environment, and this thing runs on Wine just as good as it runs on Windows. So this is like it runs on Windows, Linux as well as Mac. So platform is really not a problem here. So this tool has a couple of components. What you can do is you can start a full automated scan. So if you have a website and you would like to discover if it has any vulnerabilities, what you can do is you can type in the URL of the site, and you can say start scan. So this opens up a wizard. So you just step through it. There are some configuration options you can give if you want to make your scan more effective. But then if you don't understand any of this, you can just these will probably make more sense to the security guys. But then if you don't understand any of this, you can just step through. You can just click next, because the default options that are selected there, the optimal defaults, right? So the defaults will do fine. So when you do this, what actually happens is the tool does a crawl of the site. It identifies the different sections of the site, the different forms and the pages and everything. And after it identifies these pages, it actually starts vulnerability scans on each of them, right? And if it does find any vulnerabilities, it will report that information to you. So on the left-hand side, which you don't see here, so we can actually see that vulnerabilities are listed here by their severity level. So if you go to high, so you can actually see that insecure basic authentication is being used. So it tells you what the vulnerability is, and the summary section gives you a little bit of information about the vulnerability, and it also gives you the request and response associated with the vulnerability, so that you get an idea about what the vulnerability is. Now I'll not harp a lot on the security aspect of it, because probably that's not something you guys are interested in, right? But if you do want to, okay, hang on. So this has found a local file include vulnerability as well. This is a high risk vulnerability, which is found in web applications. So it has found that particular issue. So using it, the application is actually able to get contents of the boot.ini file from the server. Okay, so. Oh, it's gone there. So you can see, the contents of the boot.ini file of your Windows machine. It's possible to get the boot.ini file of the server, right? So this is a vulnerability. So this way anybody can get access any file which is located on the server. So this vulnerability was detected automatically using the tool. So this is something you can do against your web application to identify vulnerabilities. What you can also do is, say if you're a web developer, right? Normally you would be doing debugging of your code. If something doesn't work, you want to find out what is actually wrong. What you can do is, the tool has something called as a proxy, right? So you would all know what a proxy server is. You would know Squid proxy servers, right? So they basically act like a gateway to your traffic. So this has a proxy server built into it. It listens on port 8080, right? So what I'll do is I'll go and I'll configure my Firefox to use the local host port 8080 as its upstream proxy, okay? So when I do that and I go to any website, the site loads up, but the interesting part is, like all the traffic which was sent by the browser and the traffic and the response that came back from the server, right? So everything is logged here. So you can so this is the initial request that was sent. You can see all the request headers and everything. And this is the response. It was a 302 redirect to www.yahoo.co.com, and yeah, so this is the final response of in.yahoo.com. You could do a render. So this is the response that came back. So so when you're doing debugging, say for example something doesn't work, right? Say for example you have a lot of Ajax requests and something doesn't work. So you can actually set this as a proxy. You can look at each request that is going to the server, and you can use it for debugging, basically to figure out why some of your web-based code is not working, right? Yeah, so that's something you can do, and what you can also do is, okay, let me go to search here. Yeah. What you can also do is, I just went to the site, I did a search for this, like random string. This request is logged here, okay? So now let's say I want to check if the search feature has any security problem, okay? So that's all I'm interested in. Let's say you guys are developers, you've just developed this particular search feature, and you're interested in knowing if that new component has any vulnerabilities, okay? So what you can do is, you can go to the logs, you can pick that particular request which had the search query going. You can right click on it and you can say select for automated scanning, okay? So you get a wizard which lets you run a vulnerability scan of that particular request. So you can run through the wizard. You have a bunch of vulnerability checks you can select from. So let's say you guys, just for the demo, I'll go with cross-site scripting. Okay, it is one of the common web application vulnerabilities, and now it is asking me which section of the request I must scan. So this is the query parameter where my text string was actually going. So let me scan this parameter. I'll start a scan, and yeah, so you can actually see that a new vulnerability called as cross-site scripting has been found. Yeah, it tells me that the txt search parameter of the query section, has this particular issue, right? So if you have coded this feature, you run the scan, and if it has this vulnerability, it will immediately let you know, right? So you can fix this issue before you probably push this code into production, right? Because normally what will happen is, I guess, once you guys are done with your coding, it goes to a testing team. they do the testing, and then they tell you where there are problems, right? So by the time it gets to the team, it's kind of late. But if you're writing a code, you can immediately do it's like a preliminary check. If there is something wrong, you can probably fix it, and then so that when it goes to the testing team, they have less issues to find and report to you guys, right? So it kind of saves time in a way, right? So that is something you can do, when you guys are coding to save you time. Any questions on this? Yes, please.
Can you do intercept HTTPS request?
Oh yes, you can.
I mean, will it decode it by itself?
Yes, so what it actually does is, when you have an HTTPS request, the tool will send its own certificate, okay? Say for example, if I go here,
Google Mail is HTTPS.
yeah, like my Iron Wasp is also HTTPS, so I go with that. Alright, so now when I go here, it says that this connection is untrusted, do you want to trust it, and stuff like that. So basically what happens is, the tool, it creates a certificate by itself, and it tries to send it to the browser. Now it's a fake certificate, so the browser warns you, telling you that the certificate is not actually belonging to the website. Do you still want to trust it? But if you say yes, I want to trust it, say yes, confirm security exception. So now this is loading over HTTPS, right? But you can actually see that in the logs, ironwars.org, get request is captured, right? So you can actually turn interception on. So if I click on something, so this basically stops the request going there. It shows me the request. If you guys want to edit something here, maybe you can edit it, and then you can send it to the server. Right?
Could you intercept googlemail.com after you added the fake certificate?
You can, I guess, yeah.
Okay.
It'll work for all HTTPS sites. The procedure is similar, right? So you can intercept all this traffic and you can look at it.
Sometimes it doesn't work with Chrome. So
Chrome,
you
yeah.
you better try IE.
Yeah. So the thing is, with some browsers, for known websites like Twitter and Google, Gmail, and other browsers, what they do is they use certificate pinning. So they actually know what is the certificate of the actual server. So if any other certificate comes, they don't let you accept the new certificate, right? So it's like they're trying to save the user. So in that case, you could use another browser like Internet Explorer probably, which will let you click through the exception, and then you will be able to intercept the traffic, right? So if you are interested in seeing what Gmail actually sends, you could use something like that and you can actually see that. Yes.
Can you SQL injections? Like I've used tool called Backtrack Linux,
Yeah.
and it lets you do all kinds of cool
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
scripts and stuff.
Right.
So how different is this tool from that? And would it let me do everything that Backtrack Linux?
Yeah, you can do all the cool stuff which Backtrack Linux
Because I
does.
don't even have to know what's going on. I mean,
Right.
SQL injection, it automatically lets me know
Right.
if there are any and stuff like that.
Yeah, so if you remember, like when I actually started the scan, so it has about 10 vulnerability checks, and you can see there is SQL injection listed there as well, right? So it checks for all of them, and then so this is pretty much what the tools in Backtrack do as well, right? And in fact, this tool was compiled by an independent site which did a comparison of all open source and commercial tools for web security scanning. And amongst open source tools, this was listed as the number 2, right? So this happened back in I think July last year. It has like improved a lot since then, right? So there is a very good probability that you might actually end up with better results, when you use this compared to probably one of the other tools which are available in Backtrack.
And can you use any web scraping libraries along? Because you said you have a Python scripting course.
Yes, yes.
So something like Mechanize can be Mechanize library, which lets you
To
do some
crawl
web
the site,
scraping.
you mean?
Yeah, I mean get the forms and do some manipulation.
Get the forms, submit
Yeah,
the forms
submit the
with some
form
data.
and-
Yeah, I've actually got something better than Recognize. Like I've got my own API, right? So I'll just come to that in a bit. Okay. Alright, so this is like something from a security perspective that you guys can actually do to discover vulnerabilities in the sites that you have. The actual logic which discovers these vulnerabilities is written in Python or in Ruby. So if you go to the dev section, you can actually see like a bunch of plugins listed here for code injection, for SQL injection, and cross-site scripting. So this is actually the entire source code of the plugin. For cross-site scripting, the plugin is about 1,000 lines long, and this is all Python code, right? So you can actually take a look at, if you are a security guy probably, you can take a look at the logic, and if you want to incorporate your own checks, you could edit the logic and you can save the plugin and you can use the new updated plugin, right? So so this is actually like a framework by which you can write your own scanner. Yeah? Okay, so this is this is as far as the vulnerability scanning goes and the proxying ability. Now the tool has something called as a scripting shell, right? So this is something which lets you have full access to all the functionality within the tool, right? If you want to get started with the scripting component of IMOS, there is actually a little utility called as a script creation assistant. So you can launch it. It's a UI based assistant, right? Which helps you in performing some tasks that you might actually want to do. Say for example, let's say you want to create a request. You want to send the request to the server and you want to get the response back. Okay, let's say that is your requirement. Now, to do that, first you have to create a request, right? So now you can create a request from here. So it's asking you to enter the URL of the request. So you can say google.com. If you want to add a post body to it, you can do that as well. In this case, let's just create a regular request without a post body. So I put in the URL and then I say generate code. Okay. So this gives me the code that I have to use to create a new request object. So I'll go to my scripting shell. I'll type that. So I've got a new request object called as REQ, right? So this is the request object. Now, if I want to send this request, right? So I'll go to send request, and so it gives me a bunch of options saying how should I send this request. I could send it normally, or if I send this and there is a 302 response, and if I want to follow the redirect, for example, I could choose to do that. So in this case, I'll just do a simple send. So the send normally is selected. So I'll say generate code, and this gives me the code to generate the request. Okay. So I'll copy this. I'll run this code. Now I've sent the request and I've got the response back. The response is stored in this variable called as res. Okay. Now let's say I want to look at what was the response code that came back from the server. So what I can do is I can go to response, and if I want to look at the code, if I want to read the code value, so if I click on a property, it actually highlights the section of the request that property denotes. So this will print the response code. So the response code in this case is 301, right? So we can actually confirm it. We can go to the logs, we can go to the shell logs, and this is the actual request that we sent for google.com, and this is the response that came back, right? It's a 301 response, and like our script actually tells you that the response code is so and so. Right? So you can, this way, using this utility, you can create any kind of request you want. You can send the request, you can modify any parameter. For example, in the request, if you wanted to add a query parameter, let's say, add a new parameter, you want to add a parameter called as AAA with value BBB. So this is the code with which you do that. Now let me run that. So now we have added a new parameter to the request, right? So we're going to send the request again, right? We sent it. So now if you go to the logs, you can actually see that this time the request was sent with this new parameter added to it, right? So this way you can create requests, you can send it, you can analyze the response. If you want to analyze any part of the response. You want to analyze the headers, you want to analyze the set cookie values. If the response has an HTML and you want to has anybody done that, parsing HTML and like extracting data from that?
Yes. That's
Yeah.
very
So what APIs do you guys normally use?
Beautiful solution.
Beautiful Soup. Yeah. So that's like the de facto for Python programmers.
We also see XML if its file size is very large.
Okay. Right. But Beautiful Soap is, I think, is the most popular.
Mm.
Yeah. So what I've actually done is I've written some other I've created a different API for analyzing the HTML. So you can go to analyze HTML and there are a bunch of options. If you want to get the title of the HTML, so this is the code for it. So you have response. Response has an object called as property called as HTML, which is the parsed HTML of the response object. And if you say dot title, it will give you the title of the response, right? So we can actually try that. Okay, the title is just 301 moved. Okay. If you want to extract like the value from some elements, you can do that as well. You can enter the tag name from which you want to extract data. So you say you want to get it from a div tag. You can enter the attribute name. Okay. Let's say ID and you can enter the attribute value, which let's say ID is token. Okay. So there is a HTML tag which the tag name is ID, the attribute name is tag name is div, attribute name is ID, and attribute value is token. So this will get you that HTML element from the response, right? If you want to get the values of some HTML attribute, again you can do that. Let's say if you say script source. So this will do is it will get you the value of all this source attributes from all the script tags, right? So it's just one line of code, right? So and the best part is you can generate the code from the UI, right? So that is probably the best part. So I don't know how it compares with Beautiful.soup.
Beautiful Soup.
Yeah, Beautiful Soup. I don't know how relatively if it's better or worse. But then I guess it's even if it's worse, it's probably not too worse, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have to rely on a separate
Sometimes when the tags are not properly, end tag
formatted.
formatted,
Right.
right? Some of the formatting. So Beautiful Soup is more
Handles
tolerant,
all of that.
more tolerant actually.
Yes,
So it
yes.
inserts sometimes.
Right,
you
right.
know. So yeah, but if it is not a strict XML,
Right.
you know,
Right.
so how liberal you
Yeah,
are.
that's an excellent point. In fact, the API that I'm using underneath to parse the HTML, it is like the .NET equivalent of Beautiful Soup. So it is equally liberal because HTML, there's a lot of badly written HTML out there. So this thing it does not look for strict HTML syntax. It is very liberal, very tolerant. And in a lot of cases it actually tries to do best mapping and everything, and tries to do it. So I think no matter how bad your HTML is, this thing will still parse. But how good is it when it comes to parsing related to Beautiful.soup? Probably only some Python programmers can tell me that, right? Because you guys have used that. So if you use this and if you compare both, then you can tell me, hey, this thing is better or this thing is worse. But in most cases, this will get the job done, right? Yeah. So like I was saying, you can create requests, you can send requests, you can get the response, you can analyze the response. But the best part about doing scripting, now this is something that you can do from the Python's shell as well, right? You can create a request object, you can send it, you can get the response back. But there are a few advantages as when you use this particular tool. The biggest advantage is when you send a request, the request is actually logged in a particular place. Any request that you send from the scripting shell is actually logged. So you can go to the log section and you can actually see the request that you sent and the response that came back. So during your analysis, or even if you want to figure out if your script is working properly, this actually makes it very easy because you can actually come here and see what the script did, right? Which is something you don't get when you're trying to do a script directly from within your Python what is it called this? The Python interpreter. There is an interactive mode, right?
Console.
Yeah, Python console, yes. Yeah. So it's not something that you get from the Python console. And another advantage is, if you are handling HTTPS, I don't know how it is in Python, but in Perl I had a lot of problem when I had to send an HTTPS request because I had to get the libraries separately for HTTPS, SSL related libraries. And if you're sending a request, and let's say in your company you guys have an upstream proxy, for example, then you have to configure the proxy inside your API, and that is usually not that easy, right? But in this case, what you can do is you can configure the proxy, for the tool in the UI, right? So even if your proxy is going to change, your script will still remain the same. So because when you try to send a request using this API, it automatically uses the proxy that you've configured in the tool, right? So you don't have to deal with the proxy yourself. Any HTTPS related problems, you don't have to deal with all of that. You just focus on your logic. That's it, right? So that is those are like two advantages that you have when you use this for your HTTP scripting, right? There is another advantage, which is when you try to send a request to the server, right? The most difficult part is probably creating the request, right? If the request is simple, then it's really not a problem. But then if it has like 6 header parameters, then you have to and cookie parameters, like 6 or 7 cookie parameters, then you have to programmatically add all this to your request object, and then you have to send it, which is kind of a problem, right? It takes up a lot of time unnecessarily. But the best thing about this tool is you can, like I showed you, use this tool to intercept the traffic which your browser is sending. So you can capture the traffic, and once that is captured, you can actually pick a request from the log, and you can send the same request again, right? So if I go here, so when I go to create request, it gives me 2 options: create request from a URL, or pick a request which is already available in the logs, right? So now there are different kinds of logs. I can go to proxy log, and let's say this is the proxy log. Yeah, let's say I want to send this request. Yeah, the request number 82. So what I'll do is I'll say the proxy, and the ID is 82. Okay. Now it gives me the code by which I can create this request. So let me copy this. Okay, so now I have, it says request.from proxy log, and the log ID is 82. Now this request object is an exact representation of the request which was available in my log. So I do not have to handcraft all the parameters. I just pick it from the log, I convert it into a request object. If I want to, I can modify 1 or 2 parameters, and then I can just send this request. Right, so this is the Yahoo homepage with all the cookie values and everything sent. Okay, the response is a JSON response. Okay, so but anyway, the request itself is the actual request from the log. So this is something I don't think you can do when you try to do scripting from your Python APIs, like direct Python APIs when you do it from the interpreter, because you have to handcraft the request every time. But in this case, you can capture the request from your proxy, and then you can, for example, if you're doing some kind of testing, right, of any feature you guys have newly programmed into your web application, you can intercept the traffic, and then you can write the script which will just read from the log, and then it will resend those requests, and you can kind of automate your testing, right? So that is something that you guys can do. Yeah, so that is like really the basics of the scripting capability within the tool. It has a lot of features. You can analyze the logs. Say, for example, all the request and response, which is collected in the logs, right? You can read through every single request and response, and you can, like analyze them for certain information. Say, for example, let's say you have like a big site written, like a lot of junior developers have written it, and there is a particular parameter. Let's say there is a parameter called as credit card, for example, okay, which you guys had in your test application when you were coding it, but then before you moved it to production, you actually wanted to make sure that parameter is removed, right? So you want to confirm if that is actually the case, if it has been removed from all places. So what you can do is you can set IMOSP as a proxy. You can browse through the entire site manually. So you would have collected all the logs, like all the request and response you would have collected. You can programmatically go through every single request and response, and you can check if any request has this parameter called as credit card, or if any response has this parameter called as credit card in its HTML. And you can confirm that this parameter has been fully removed from my application, right? So so if you want to analyze the logs, you can select which log you want to analyze, and it gives you the code by which you can actually loop through the log, pick each request and response, and you can analyze them individually. So it gives you the code for doing that. So all of this is actually working code, So you can just paste it in the shell and it will work. So you have both interactive shell, which is like kind of like your IPY, and you have a multi-line shell, so which is kind of like you're writing your own script. You paste the whole thing, and then you click on execute multi-line script, it will execute it, right? Yeah, so this is something related to web applications. After this, it all goes into the security area, because there is more scripting capability, but that pertains to the security aspect of the tool, right? So if you guys have any questions so far, probably I guess you could ask me, or if you have any scenarios that you would have wanted to automate, probably.
Here we can resend the request from log. So if
Yes.
session is timed out on the server,
Yes.
and will it recreate the session, or what will happen?
Yeah. So what you can actually do is you can write the code to do a login automatically.
Okay.
Right.
Will it log in?
Yeah, I mean
It will
it
use the
would.
same request. It will use the same request.
No. So basically, when you do a login from your browser, you are sending a username and password.
Yeah.
The server authenticates you and it sends you a new session ID.
Yes.
That's what actually happens. You can do the same thing programmatically, right? So what you could do is
That session is still there.
Yeah.
for the one that we created.
Yes.
But I think if I explain it now, it will get too complicated.
Sure.
How much time do I have?
You can take 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes. You want me to go with that?
15 minutes, okay.
You could just show that, look, it's detected
Okay.
a logout, and that's what.
Okay, right. So let me just. There is a username and password on this site, I guess. Okay. Okay, see, I have this. Okay, I have this website. I go to the online banking login. So this thing actually has a simple username and password. So I'll do a login.
Just say never for this site. I will simply be irritated.
Oh, that okay. So next time I'll do it. So now it has logged me in. It says hello admin user. So now I'll log off. Okay, now the login that I did, let's say I want to record this process. I want to use it repeatedly, right? So what I can actually do is I have something called as a session plugin creation assistant, right? So I go there. So it will give me a bunch of like site behaviors to record. So I'll say I want to handle login, right? So it explains me what it does. I'll say yes, I want to record login. Now it is asking me, which request to send to check if the user is logged in or not. Okay. So like before I can do a login, I have to know if the user is logged in or logged out. Correct? So I have to. So the best option would be to send a request to the profile page. If the user is logged in, I'll probably get the profile information. If the user is logged out, I'll probably be redirected to the login page. Probably, yeah. So if I go to the logs, so after I do a login, I think this is the profile page which I see. Let's confirm it. Yeah, so it says hello admin user. So this is the profile page. Now, when I was logged in, and I send a request here, I get a 200 OK response, right? Now I have logged out of this page. Now let me resend this request again. I'm sending it one more time. So now it does a 302 redirect to login.aspx, right? So this page, if I send, it will give me different response for logged in user and logged out user. Okay, so I'll use this. So this is log ID 139. So that's what the tool is asking me. Give me the request which I can send to detect if the user is logged in or logged out. So I'll say send this particular request to do the detection. And now it is asking me, okay, I send this request, the response comes back. What does a logged in request look like? What does a logged out request look like? Okay. So I'll say the logged out request will basically be a 302 response, right? And the response header will the response header has the location header takes me to login.aspx, right? So I'll say location header contains login. Okay, so now it says, okay, I can detect if you're logged in or logged out. Now after that, how do I log you in, right? So for this, we have to tell the tool what is the request which contains the username and password, which is sent. So now in this case, if you look at the logs, you can see this post request. This has the username and password, admin, right? So this is ID 138. So I'll say proxy log ID 138 is the login request. Okay, and I guess we are done. So whatever information we gave so far, right, it converts it into something called as a pseudocode. Okay, so this is something you don't probably have to worry about. So now you've configured the login, process. You've told the tool how the login actually works. Now you can create the session plugin. You can give a name for the session plugin. I'll say PyLogin, and it will ask you which language you want to create the plugin in. You can pick Python or Ruby. So since you guys are all Python developers, I'll pick Python. And yeah, so now the plugin is created. So the logic that you guys gave in the UI, based on that, the tool has actually created a Python script which will check if you're logged out. If you're logged out, it will log you back in, right? So that's what the script will actually do. And the name of the script is PyLogin, right? I just gave the name. Now I'll just run the script, to show you how it works, right? So I'll do an automated scan for one of the requests. I'll check for XPath. I'll inject the header parameter. So now I actually see that the plugin is listed. So I'll select that. Say start scan. Yeah. So the scan is running, and I guess it's complete as well. Yeah, if I go to the trace area, you can actually see everything that the plugin did. So it says preparing the main request before sending. So this is the request that we are going to scan, and then it is saying sending the login check request. It is sending the request to the profile page to check if the user is logged in or not. So if you see, this is the request going to the profile page, and the response is 302, meaning the user is logged out, right? So it says user is logged out. Now it is performing a login, and this is the login happening. So you can see it is sending the login request with the username and password. It performs the login, and after it does the login, it again sends a check to see if you're logged in, if the login process actually succeeded. And it sends a login request again, and this is the same request, and this time it's a 200 OK. Last time it was a 302 when the user was logged out. This time when you actually enter it, it says hello admin user, meaning it logs you in, right? So, and then it goes on with the regular scanning. So this session plugin, right? You can, when you have a login process, you can program it this way, okay? And from your script, you can actually call this. So what you can do is, I'll just open up the script briefly. This is all auto-generated code, right? So from the configuration you guys gave in the UI, all this code was automatically generated by the tool, and this code is what is actually checking if you're logged in, and then it logs you back in. And here you can see that there is a method called as do before sending. So when you're trying to do an automated scan, the tool calls this method of the plugin, and this method, it calls this method called as is logged underscore in, which does the login check. If you are not logged in, it calls the login underscore user method. Okay. Now what you can do is, this is what the scanner is doing. Now once you create this plugin, you can also call this method from your scripting shell. Okay. So let me do that. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll send this request. Okay. But I'll send this request using the session plugin, so that if I'm logged in, I'll be logged in first, and then this request will be sent to the server. Okay? So the request ID is 141. So I'll say R is equal to request from proxy log 141. Right? So now I'll use the session plugin that I created. So I'll say session plugin .get, and I'll give the name of the session plugin. The name is PyLogin, right? Now the session plugin has a method called as do before sending. So I'll say sp dot do before sending, and I'll pass the request as an argument to it, and then I have to pass another argument, which is the response object. Okay. So now in this case we don't have any response, so I'll just pass null as the input. Okay. So now what has happened is we have called this method of the plugin. Now this method actually checks if you are logged in. If you are not logged in, it does a login, right? And now you can say r.send. So now what you can do is, before you send a request, you create a session plugin where you program your authentication, and then you call the do before sending method of that session plugin. So when you do that, what will happen is, if you come down here, yeah, so you can actually see that it did a login one more time, right? So and then it sent your request, right? So this way you can, in your script, if you're logged out, you can log yourself back in, and then you can do your stuff. Yeah, so that is that's pretty much it, guys. Because like anything beyond this is it'll go into the security area. It's probably, I'm not sure if you guys are really into that stuff. But, I think it's probably enough for one day also. Yeah. So any questions in what you guys have seen so far?
How was your experience with embedding IronPython into an application?
IronPython was actually easy to implement because Python is a very simple language. There are no hidden surprises. Now, in the same tool, I have implemented IronRuby as well, and that was a big problem. Now, because Ruby is very powerful, but also it has some restrictions. Like when it comes to method overloading, Ruby has or even when you name classes in Ruby, to name a class, it has to start from a uppercase character. It is not just a convention; it is a rule. You cannot have a class starting with a lowercase character. And when it comes to method overloading, again Ruby had some problems. But relatively, embedding IronPython was very, very simple.
So it uses IronPython and IronRuby.
Yes, internally. So the core APIs are written in C#. They are .NET-based APIs, but they have exposed them to the scripting shell, which is IronPython or IronRuby. So they can call not just these APIs. They can make use of the entire .NET framework. All APIs in the framework, you can make use of that. Yeah, right. So
How much effort was put into this level?
the tool, the entire tool you mean?
It's quite complicated.
Yeah, it is it is a big tool. I've been coding this tool since I think Jan 2011. 2 years of coding. So 1.5 years of half-time coding because I used to work in the day. I had a day job. I used to come back home and then I used to code it. And then since July last year, I've been doing this full time. Right? So yeah, I mean like 2 years of coding experience. And the good thing is, what I've done is, now that the API is rich and it's very useful, I've exposed it through a system called as modules. Okay. So what you can actually do is, you can write your own tools and you can embed them within IronWasp using the API of the tool. So you can call these. So like for example, there is this module called as body saver. If I right click on a request and response and I call this module, so what this will do is this will basically give me an option to save the body to a particular file, right? So basically stuff like this. So this is something I've done. Hey, and by the way, there is one thing I wanted to show. Anybody here has done GUI programming? Probably you have in Python. So with what system do you use?
Usually WX Python.
WX Python. Okay, great. Anybody else?
I've used PyQt.
PyQt. Okay, PyQt.
I've used PySide. It's a Qt.
Okay, a family Qt family. Okay. All right. WX. Okay, 2 WX and 2 Qt. Right. What I've done is I have implemented my own UI design system. If you're coding in IronPython, you could use that. Now I don't know how easy or difficult like your frameworks have been. So I'll show you how it is done here. Right. So then you can tell me if it's better or worse. Right? So there is something called as a UI designer. Right. And here you can create a new design, and this gives you like a UI form. You can say drag a label, give a name to it, and drag a text box. Then you say drag a button. We can name the button and say start button, right? Now, when somebody clicks on this button, I need some action to happen. So basically I need an event handler. So I'll go to event handler, and then it has the click method. So I can give a function name. which will be executed when this method is called. So I'll say, start code or something. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And yeah, so I have kind of designed like a simple UI, and then I say generate code. So what it does is it converts the entire design into XML, and it also creates Python and Ruby equivalents for the UI. So if I copy this Python code, right, and then I go to my scripting shell, I paste it here, and then I first execute. So this thing actually runs it, and when it runs, the UI opens up, right? So you don't have to like really. I don't know how it happens in your Qt and WX world though.
There's an application called WXQuay which does pretty much exactly this.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's also cross-language. It can generate code for C++ or for Ruby or Python.
Wow,
Or
nice.
whatever other languages are supported. by
Okay,
WX.
okay.
So,
But the design itself is similar.
it's similar. It's a little bit different because there are sizers involved and stuff. But, usually sizers. You don't have to. There are two different ways of doing layouts within WX. One is to use sizers, one is to use absolute positioning. So I haven't actually used WXQuay that much myself,
Okay,
so
okay.
I shouldn't keep talking about it.
Okay. But more or less similar, you
But
say.
yeah, it's pretty
So
simple.
the approach is similar. Oh, yeah. So here you have this system. So in fact, there is this module I wrote called as Compass. So this thing is actually a security analysis module, which can be helpful even if you're a developer. So what it does is it analyzes, like if you browse through a site, it analyzes all the logs, and it gives you like all the parameters available in the particular site. And then if you want to look at the value, say for example, X-frame options, you want to see, or set cookie, you want to see all the set cookie headers set by yahoo.com. So you can click on that, and these are the set cookie values which are set by Yahoo, right? So you can go through the entire site, you can find out all the parameter names, and you can look at the parameter values. If there are any encoded parameter names, hex encoded or base64 encoded names, it will decode them and it will show you. If there are any hashed encoded, hashed parameter values, it will discover that. It will also try to crack the hashes. If it is able to crack it, it will display the cracked value. Otherwise, it will just tell you that this looks like a MD5 hash or this looks like a SHA hash. Right? So it does a few things like that. And this UI, like with all the different buttons and like the tabs and all that, all this was designed using the UI designer, which I just showed you. Right? So the UI designer can be, you can design UI with like reasonable complexity using this. And the actual act of designing it itself is quite easy because you just drag drop stuff. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. And the best part is when you write a code, like when you write a script or when you write a tool using this API, and you give it to somebody else to use it, and it will run on top of it because all the API that the tool will use is built into this, right? But in other cases, if you are like using native Python, C Python that is, and if you use a particular library, then like the other people, they have to download the library, install it, and then they have to use it. I'll probably get kicked out of the group for saying this because I'm like recommending IronPython over C Python, which you guys normally use, but that's one advantage you can say of using this tool. Right, guys? Yeah, so that is pretty much it. If there are any more questions, you can ask me, otherwise I'm kind of done here.
So your GUI generated code, underneath you are using WX or directly using .NET?
Oh, I'm using the .NET UI. Yeah. So from when you design this thing, I read through this, and then I convert it into.
So you generate code to leverage the .NET.
Yeah. So basically, that's what I'm doing. So if you look at all this code, all this code is individually just creating .NET buttons, .NET text box, .NET label, and it's putting in different places. So that's what it does, right? Yeah. Okay, so I guess my time is done. Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for being patient and letting a Python noob present this tool. Yeah. Very happy to be here for the first time. Thanks. Yeah. So and the URL of the site itself is imwas.org. Yeah, so this is the site. You can download the tool from here. You can actually see that there is like a separate Linux and Mac download link. So there is a script, shell script available to make this thing run on Linux. So if you just run the script, it downloads it downloads Wine and all the other dependencies required, and then it can run it from Linux. Right? So you don't really need anything else. Yeah. So that's pretty much it.